Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Magicians Without Borders Conversations. It's our episode number 45. I can't believe we've done 45 of this of these episodes already, and it's our last Wednesday of the month, so that means it's our mailbag episode. But this is going to be a different kind of mailbag because the questions that we're going to be answering are questions that we have ourselves that came up from a film. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that about it in a little bit. But as always, as before, I want to share with you some of the stuff that we always do. So this is the first one. Remember, if you guys want to learn magic from us, you can do it by going to store.magicianswithoutborders.com. Over there, you can get lessons from us. You can buy our virtual magic course called Become a Magician. It's a self-paced video magic course that you can, learn online. You're gonna get to learn enough magic to put on a 30-minute magic show by yourself. And if you guys want a magic show from our students, you can also get it here at the store. So please visit store.magicianswithoutborders for that. And today, as I said, is our mailbag episode, as every last Wednesday of the month. So if you have any questions or comments, please do send them our way to our email podcast@magicianswithoutborders.com or tweet them at magicianswb. And I am very, very glad to say that this is the first episode that we are sponsored. So it's our first sponsored episode from our sponsor, HomeLight. HomeLight empowers people to make smarter decisions during one of life's most important moments, buying or selling their home. Their technology crunches the numbers to determine which real estate agent or which instant offer company will get you the most money for your home. They build products that put more power in your hands and make it easier to get the best outcome when you buy or sell a home. So please visit www.homelight.com. So we're very grateful for HomeLight to being our sponsor. And if you're looking for homes, please do check them out. So very glad to have them as sponsors. And as always, I am here with Tom. Hey, Tom, how are you?
I am excellent, Carlos. Feeling terrific. I do a series of shows at this wonderful place in the Adirondacks, and I did my first show of this season last night, and I've been going there for 16 years. And it's a resort where people come year after year. So I've gotten to know them. I've seen their kids grow up. It's been, and it was a wonderful show. And I tried out a bunch of new things. Some of them worked really well. Some of them worked sort of well, but I'll have the week now to work on it and try it again next Tuesday. So I'm feeling great.
So nice that you get to do your live shows over there. I know you enjoy them a lot.
I do.
I'm very happy for you.
So I'm looking forward to tonight. I think we're going to spend some time looking at this beautiful little film to Gerard, and we're going to be doing it with someone I've gotten to know over the last few years, and I'm going to be thrilled that she's on the episode tonight. And it's a different kind of mailbag.
Mailbag, yeah.
It's great.
Yes, I'm very excited as well because this is going to be our guest put a lot of effort into preparing for tonight with the little homework that we had her do. But I'm also very excited because I would love to for both of you to get into a little bit more of how you got the relationship going and how that evolved and all the support that she gives us today. So I think that's very, very, very important for me to share, and I think that's also very important for our listeners.
Yeah.
So, anything, any stories or anecdotes that you want to share before we bring her in?
Well, as some viewers may know, I know one of them in particular who was a guest a few weeks back, Michael Wald. I used to own a magic shop, and we had different suppliers, and one of them was our guest's father. And he is the owner of Easy Robbins Magic. And I dealt with him personally for many years. And it was really, really wonderful when Elise and I connected a few years back. And I realized, time had passed. And now I was developing this relationship with this man's daughter. I mean, that's the way it happens if you stay around long enough. So I'm really, really happy. She's a very multi-talented person who now is has taken over since her father died a few years back. She's um, taking over Robin's magic and trying to find new ways and forms. And so we can talk a little bit about that, but we're mainly going to talk about this little film to Gerard.
That's awesome. So yes, I love the little description that she puts on her profile. It says storyteller and voyeur and magical facilitator. So let's welcome Elise Freed. How are you, Elise?
Well, I am fabulous because I live in front of the ocean and I just went on my swim. So
good.
I feel great. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for accepting the invitation. And it's really amazing the kind of unknown history that we've had over all these years because of your father and Robin's. And I'm very happy that you have joined the Magicians Without Borders family and have provided us and provided our students with magic props from your wonderful company. And thank you very much for doing that.
I wish I could do more, Tom. Thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah. So, should we? Well,
I want to know a little bit more about Elise. So
yeah, absolutely, good idea.
You know, a little bit more about yourself. How how this magic world came to be for you, and where are you up to now? We'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I mean, I basically grew up in a magical family. It's my lineage. It's my heritage. I didn't realize how strange my life was until I was a lot older. I actually grew up in Coney Island. And so I had a father who started in this business, I think at the age of 17. He bought chemical magic from a person. He bought formulas, so for invisible ink. And then he started manufacturing chemical magic with his uncle. And then he bought D. Robbins, I think, in an effort to impress my mother that he was a businessman. So he did, I think, 2 years before my birth. And then he became head of the Magic Dealers Association of America for 5 years. So at that time, there were very few wholesale magic companies. I think there were probably 4. Now there's many, many more. He had a 50-year relationship with Sam Dalal in India, who still provides a lot of our magic, beginner magic, because we like to have many different levels of magical products so that everybody can afford to do it. I wish we could do more DIY magic, print at home, do-it-yourself magic, because I'm so ecologically conscious and I hate shipping.
Yeah.
I took over the business with my sister, so we co-own it. I just wanted to say that. But I'm currently the head of the ship. It's been very challenging, like every business. And I guess my background is also in humanitarian work as well as filmmaking. So I was very honored to help you, Tom, and I wish I could do more. I would love to actually start a website that funnels money to you and also other educational institutions around the world for new types of magicians, meaning new types of magicians, people that take magic and make it their own.
Yeah.
And that we see different types of faces interpreting magic in the future. I should say that we also published the Tarbell Course in Magic since 1924, which was the seminal way to learn magic long ago and still. And the best way to use that resource is to read it, understand it as conceptual, but not verbatim, and to make it your own. So I'm going to let you ask me questions. I love the film Gerard. I actually was a filmmaker for about 15 years. I did actually go to film festivals and review films. So I can look at it as a film. It's obviously from DreamWorks. It's wonderful. And the message is also wonderful.
Yeah.
We wanted to discuss today mentoring, which I have to say it's been an interesting transition. This business now is 106 years old. The Easy Magic trademark was something we used to manufacture, and D. Robbins is named after David Robbins, who my father bought the business from. I guess it was, 40, 50, 65 years ago-ish.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge to transition to the world of online mentoring, as everybody has done this last year. Yeah. And I still feel like you have to have a one-on-one relationship with somebody who's better than you in order to progress in your life, to have someone care, to have someone to perform to, and to tell you what is your next trick for you or your next level for you, which is not necessarily going to happen if you just look at other people online.
Yeah. That's interesting. You should say that before the show began, Carlos was asking me what new things I did last night at the show. And I was talking to him about one thing that I did. And I said, I have a luncheon with the magic creator. He's not so much a performer. That's not what his gift is. His writing. I think now he has 15 books on magic, Robert Neal. And I'm having lunch with him next Monday. And I'm going to perform that trick for him and ask him. He's my mentor. And ask him to give me feedback about it, and help me. Because I think it's basically a good thing. But I know with a mind like Robert Neal has, he'll take it to a new level and force me to think about it in new ways.
I think it's a great way that you can say that Robert Neal is your mentor. I think that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing I just wanted to say quickly, Elise, I don't think I've ever told you this, but up in my attic, in a cardboard box sealed with packing tape, is an original mimeographed copy of the Tarbell course. That a friend of mine who was a Boy Scout, and they often were encouraged to subscribe to that first Tarbell when they would send one out, once a month or something. Is that how it worked?
It was by subscription, yes. And I think that was, again, 1924. So the language is all geared towards men.
Yeah.
I have to say that the company is run by women.
Yeah.
And I have I'm very happy that the film Gerard had a female. Oh, I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I shouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
I shouldn't let that go. It has a female protagonist.
that's really great. You said that. That's terrific. Yeah. I just watched a little Today Show NBC thing on women in magic. And one of the great supporters of Magicians Without Borders, a Las Vegas magician, Jen Kramer, every night when she begins her show, she projects a little film of her performing with Magicians Without Borders in India and talks about Magicians Without Borders. And she was featured with Abby McBride on the Today Show last week. So it's great.
I wanted to say that I think that's so important because I remember well, one of those moments when you're like, oh yes, this whole magic world that it has so many cool things, but others that are not so cool. And one of them is that it's way too male dominated. And one of our students, our star students, it's Tamara, right? And she's very she always asks for advice on how to perform, how to do this, how to dress. And then she was having a question of how could she dress right in a different way because she wanted to. And I remember that conversation and saying I feel so inadequate giving her advice, right? Because it's like,
here's what happened to me when I inherited this business. I ended up going to like 7 different magic conventions around the world, which was really interesting because I got to see who were magicians in each country. So yes, it's still 95% men in England, in South Korea, in Italy, in Las Vegas. And we tried to have some meetings with the women. There were extremely few women magicians. But I would have to say, I look at it more as an avatar. If you want to give advice to the women magicians, to say, who's your inner avatar that you want to become? And everybody develops their own character as a magician. Sometimes it's yourself. Sometimes it's a character you create on stage. And you guys must know much more about that than I do. I just try to become a mermaid. I have to just say, I'm very proud of myself. I did my lifetime best last week. I did 9 miles in ocean.
Wow.
Oh, that's great. You grew up in Coney Island. Do you know that amazing book by Alice Hoffman, The Museum of Incredible Things? It's about a mermaid or about a woman. It's incredible. It takes place in Coney Island. And she's a great author. You probably know her work, Alice Hoffman. But anyhow, should we get on to this little film, Gerard?
Sure. Let's get on. We can get on that subject for a long time. So this film is called To Gerard. And I'm going to go here for people that are watching. I am showing the website of DreamWorks, where it says the plot of To Gerard. It's a DreamWorks animation short film that is written and directed by Taylor. I don't know how to say that last name.
Miachim.
Yeah. And the plot is this, that towards the doldrum end of his shift, a spiritedly mailman sorts envelopes and packages nimbly with the flick of a wrist. Despite working in a post office all his life, Gerard has dreamed of one day finding his audience as a famous magician, like his childhood hero. With effortless dexterity that accompanies mastery, this delightful, overgrown kid practices magic every day with a special coin, a gift from the great Vivanti. When an inquisitive young girl named Jules wanders upon his practice routine, she's dazzled by his talents. With the help of his cherished coin, Gerard charms his first ever audience member with an impromptu magic show. In this moment, 2 artists, separated by decades, unknowingly set off a chain reaction that will change both their lives forever. So that's the plot, and here is the trailer of that film. So here we're gonna watch it. Here we go.
There you go, Gerard. Maybe one day there will be a time you can create a little magic of your own.
So it's a wonderful film. It's a wonderful film, and we want to discuss it. So we want to get, first of all, I would love to go from each of one of you, your reaction. What's your reaction? What was your first reaction to the film, Elise?
My first reaction was, wow, DreamWorks really did a good job with this, as they usually do in their animation, making the magic happen through all the perspectives and changes that you can do with animation that you can't do in a film with real filmed characters. My first reaction was it was extremely well done. The message that they wanted to give, which is please pass on the magic, to have it stay alive, really resonates, because people have been in isolation this past year, and it doesn't feel like magic without the wonder of a person in an audience, and I'm sure you guys know that from your work. It was a challenge for Gerard to give up his coin. I don't want to tell. Should I tell too much of the plot? I have no idea.
That's fine. If people are watching or listening, they can, pause this right here if you don't want any spoilers, and go watch to Gerard.
I should say it's an 8-minute film, so it's not like it's a feature-length movie, and it is online. So I think it's wonderful for children. I think it gives magicians a great message that it is imperative that we teach the next generation, actually, that we pass on the magic, because it is a gift, and without that gift, it is a lineage and a gift. In the olden days, you had to be worthy of that gift, and people would meet in the backs of magic shops and try to get the ear of a great magician, or even a good magician, to pass on some of that knowledge. And I've heard many, many stories of magicians learning an effect, I'll just call it that, from a very old magician as his parting gift, actually, and that it meant an awful lot to that magician to be chosen to have that passed on. That's kind of what I wanted to say. I mean, that might be a little different now with the way things are on the internet, etc. But I do think that it's still very meaningful to have a mentor, to have a teacher, and to have them pass on their expertise to you.
Yeah.
Nice. How about you, Tom? Thank you, Elise.
Well, I'm with what Elise said. The magic shop that I owned with another magician, my teacher, actually, Milton, had a full-fledged parlor in the back behind the store, and there was a door that was kept closed. And on Saturdays, the old-time magicians would come and sit around back there on the sofa and over stuffed chairs, and there was a magic library there and a table for performing. And if a 12-year-old came in and bought the ball and vase, and I'd say, I could show this to you, but I'd like to introduce you to somebody who does this better than anybody I know. And I would take that young person back there and introduce them to Jim Zachary or somebody who was sitting back there. And I'd say, Jim, would you teach this guy, his name's Charlie, would you teach him the cup and the ball and vase? And that was, I think, one of the most wonderful things. Oh my goodness, we just got a text from someone. I learned to do the linking from a magician in that back room. Oh my goodness, Michael, thank you. And that felt like the real deal, like the way magic had been learned for probably thousands of years from one magician to another. And I love that about our magic shop. And with Michael Wald, who just said that in the chat room, we have talked over these last few weeks on and off, and sometimes extensively when Michael was a guest on the show, about mentoring and magic and mentoring in general. And I think this movie To Gerard could be thought of as a movie about how knowledge is passed on in the mentoring kind of way. So I don't know. I just have a feeling, Carlos, and maybe you too, and especially you, Elise, who are a filmmaker, I just have a feeling it would be okay to talk about the film. I don't feel there's any great, what is that word? When you don't say it, a spoiler alert,
Okay.
that I think it's a film about, well, what's his name? The magician that Gerard sees when he's a little boy. I mean, the very opening scenes, Gerard is at a magic show done by a magician vivante. And that means it means all kinds of things, but it basically means to be alive. It means living. It means, it's like the participle of the word vivere, to living, and this magician is, I think, about life, and how life is really lived. And Gerard is a little boy, and Vivante invites him up. He said, for my next trick, I need a volunteer. And he invites Gerard up onto the stage. And he says, what is your name? And Gerard in the film very haltingly and awkwardly says, Gerard, like he's, and we had a few guests on from India about a month ago, and we talked about this camp that we hold in India, and we have these magic classes, and we ask the children to introduce themselves, and we go around, and one or two can't even say their name. They'll say Priyanka, and they're like hiding. They're so scared. And 3 days later, they're standing up and performing magic, and saying their name. And I'm a magician, and my name's Priyanka. And and I was reminded of that in the first minute of the film, that Gerard, as a little boy, like all of us, we can't even really say who we are. Mm-hmm. And Vivante does this wonderful coin routine, and he gives him the coin. Mm-hmm. And he says, there, Gerard, you can keep this coin, keep it safe. Maybe someday there will be a time you can create a little magic of your own. And toward the end of the film, he's handed that coin once again. And as it's handed to him, those of you who watch this film, there's an exquisite little detail that the filmmaker did, is Gerard sees his face reflected in that coin.
Mm.
You know? And I think like the alchemists and like many of the great myths of the gold is an image of our purest, deepest self. And I think that Gerard, through that coin and through this exquisite, it's just a poem. It's only 8 minutes long, but it's this exquisite poem about finding yourself and then giving it away and allowing someone else to find themselves. It's a really lovely, and thank you, Carlos, once again for giving me something very beautiful.
Yes, I think it's a wonderful movie. I wanted to say that what I felt when I saw it is I was very emotional. By less than half, like 2 minutes into the film, I was already crying. It's very powerful. I think it's super powerful for magicians, and I think especially for magic teachers. I think those two are very powerful because I of course there's a lot of relation. Like I see myself in him, but also in her, and it's just all that. But I think that the nicest moment for me is one, and I would love at least for you to elaborate a little bit more about this, because I know you have some thoughts on it. Is how the little girl, when she's the performer, the big illusionist in the big stage, wants to thank her mentor, right? Wants to thank Gerard, and that moment, it's wonderful when you feel it, right? And I've been, lucky enough to feel it with our students multiple times. But I remember one of the first moments like that, right? I remember in a huge theater, the kids were performing. It went great, and then they went off script, and they took the microphone and they just said, "Hey, we want everyone here to know that we're here." Because of Carlos, right? And that moment it's so beautiful, right? Because you spend the time wanting them to shine, right? And they're there doing it, right? But then they say, "Hey, it's because of you." That moment is too powerful, and in the movie,
doesn't get better than that, Carlos.
Yes, it's getting better than that. But in the movie, I think it's very well represented, and it's wonderful. So I wanted to ask you, Elise, do you have any thoughts on it, on that gesture?
I believe magic is a really interesting thing. It's a lineage, and that it's something like karate in a sense, where the practitioners really dedicate themselves with practicing. I mean, this postman practiced in isolation during his job. He always thanked his teacher. He had a poster of him up on his wall. He was his idol. And when he passed the torch to this little girl, he didn't expect anything in return, because it does take years of practice to be excellent at anything.
Yeah.
And
when he gave her that little coin, that was a big thing,
It was a big deal. And he didn't expect that she would become a magician. He just gave her the coin because she was so mesmerized and actually deserved it. I mean, she went and found it in this giant post office, futuristic post office.
Yeah.
But the main thing I wanted to say is she felt, I wouldn't say obligated, but she felt that once she reached the stage where she was professional or could be a mentor, that she absolutely felt that it was the right thing to do to find and thank her teacher. He did not expect any of it. And in fact, I don't want to spoil it, but she brought him on the stage so he could finally perform for the audience of his dreams, which was her audience. And she gave him that dream come true when he was a very old man. And somehow, like all of the great magicians I've seen, I actually saw Slidini when I was about 11 years old, where he does his magic trick with his paper and
over there.
Only for the one person that's in front of him, and the whole audience is going off the hook of, seeing the how it's done. But that for me was an example of what is magic, which we discussed earlier. It is magic for that person on the stage who it is impossible what Slidini did. For everybody else, it's a trick.
Yeah.
And a very well done trick, and even funny. But for that one person, they're completely at a loss, and it's magic. So there were people in that audience who would stare at the ceiling because there were mirrors on the ceiling. And I remember my mother looking at the ceiling, and I remember myself going, I'm not looking at the ceiling. I don't want to know. I want to be having a magical experience. That was a very, very young age for me. We went to Kutcher's Country, the Kutcher convention
in the Catskills,
upstate New York.
Yeah. The Borscht Belt.
I mean, Jeff McBride, who's also on the board, always thanks his teacher.
Yeah.
And I was actually at FISM in South Korea when he won for the magical education and philosophy. And I actually predicted it with my son. I was like, Julian, I'm going to do a mentalist trick. It's going to be Jeff McBride. And I couldn't believe it actually.
That's great. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And the first thing he did was thank his teacher. The first thing he did.
That's great. That's such an important thing. Something that I thought of is that Gerard, he never did become, that great magician whose poster he had up on the wall of his humble little mailroom in some corporate, building somewhere. And he was just a mail sorter, and yet he did it. He took the letters came down and he acted as they were a deck of cards, and he just did those flourishes with the envelopes like they were a deck of cards. And then he spun out into the middle of the room and filed them all like Ricky Jay, up into each person's mailbox, and he turned his ordinary, totally bureaucratic job into something magical. And one night I was in San Francisco and I got on a bus. I was going to the City Lights bookstore for the first time, Lawrence Ferlinghetti's Beat Mecca in South Beach. And I get on the bus and I put my money in the little thing there, and the guy says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to North Beach to the City Lights bookstore." He said, "Oh, you'd like to meet so-and-so." He said, "Jeff." And he yells for this kid, young guy, like in his early 20s, in the back of the bus. He says, "This guy likes beat poets too. Here, come on up here." And he introduced me to this guy, and I started talking to that guy, and we're talking. And this old black guy gets on the bus at the next stop, and the bus driver says, "Charlie, how's your wife doing?" And Charlie said, "Oh, she's not doing so well." And the bus driver says, "Well, tell her I said hello and I'm praying for her." And he goes back, and everybody who got on the bus, this guy knew. It was like a late shift. He just knew everybody. He introduced them to like he did to the other guy. And he turned this job into this calling, into this vocation. And just like Gerard in the so he was a magician, or he did his job in a magical kind of way. I didn't really think of that until just a few minutes ago, when I thought, that guy Vivante lived in him in some way, and he kept that alive all those years. And when that little girl, I love that the little girl is first seen with a pair of binoculars, like looking around at the world. This is one curious, attentive little girl, and she spotted that gold coin because she had her little pair of binoculars. And every frame of that film, I think, has something beautiful in it.
Yeah, I think it's very well thought out. And now that you mentioned that little girl, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Elise, on how they chose her as the protagonist.
I mean, I think we all hope that we see a lot of new, different types of magicians in the world. I think that little girls need other role models than what they've had. I actually today was talking to a little girl who was 5 years old about being a mermaid, and telling her that, you can only to not be afraid of the water, and why, and that we're in a protected inlet here, and that I will get her some little goggles so she can see that there's no sharks here, or whatever. It's really amazing to me that in the end of the film, Gerard has replaced his old mentor with a poster of his young protege, and is incredibly proud of the fact that she is now a magician and he had a lot to do with it. And I feel like he is self-actualized in the film and completed his mission. Like you said, Tom, he made his job all his life into something magical, a lot like my father, who was always an incredibly cheerful person and always helped magicians and people set up magic shops in a way that is almost impossible now, although I did actually front the Coney Island History Museum with a magic shop right before COVID, and
great,
fronted them all the merchandise, and they eventually paid me back. But I do think that there are places where there are no magic shops, where there are no models for magicians, and Coney Island has one show on Sundays. That guy has had that gig for, I think, 30 years. So it's tough to get new acts in, but there's always the street performing is a thing. My son was also a street performer. I hope there's more women magicians. I think that they would make their skits different than men. I don't have too much to say about it. I think that my son did magic when he was 8 years old and performed on the street with that and juggling, and I thought it was a wonderful experience for his self-confidence, for talking to strangers. And in fact, magic is something that people who are deaf can do, and it's an international art because it can be performed with no language. Therefore, it's kind of like a silent film. Not everybody does it that way, but it does let the magic speak for itself. The theatricality of the film was amazing, because there are some magicians that are better at theatricality and understanding where the audience is than others. This is a theatrical, either close-up or stage, but it is a relationship with the audience. You can't really do it. I mean, it's an interesting thing because Gerard practiced in isolation, and so he was always practicing, the manipulation of the coin. But he really came alive as a magician only when he had an audience. And the magic came alive in a very different way only when he had an audience.
The 2 times when he had her as an audience, he stepped up and really became the performer. And then at the end, you're right, it takes an audience.
Well, he also looked super crickety at the end, and then kind of, how do I put it, lost about 30 years, as I have literally seen stage performers do, who are 80 years old and musicians. They just, regress in age and become limber. And
Yeah.
have you seen that?
Well, I was in the village gate one night, like 40, 50 years ago, and out came Earl Garner, like he must have been 85 years old, and he could barely make it to the piano bench. He came out and he sat down and he put his hands on the keys, and it was like he had plugged himself and he just did an hour and 15 minutes of the most amazing piano jazz. You know, he came alive, but he was clearly feeble and half dead, you know. But when he was performing, he was alive, you know.
Well, I think it's also because you're creating another world. Yeah, you're trying to create a world, a container for the magic, and that is a real skill.
Yeah, yeah. I love that as a performer. There's a very magical sort of space that I'm in when I'm performing, and I do things, I say things, sometimes somewhat inappropriate, that it just come to me at the moment, you know, and some of them are just fantastic. And there's just something about that performing space that is magical, you know. It's amazing. How about you as a performer, Carlos? You have a character that comes out when you're performing.
Totally. I think it's both a something that develops over time. You know, as a performer, you learn how to perform, or you choose how to perform. But also, it's liberating, right? I think that when you're on stage, it's something inside me. You know, lets loose, right? If you know me, and if you talk to me, and then you didn't know me before, right? And you met me in a different environment, and then you see me perform real soon, you're like, whoa, you're not like that, right? And yeah, I think it's true. Like when I perform something, I don't know, I feel, you know, that you have to be on, but that's also something that I enjoy, and that as you said, Tommy, I allow myself to do things while on stage that I wouldn't allow myself to do otherwise.
Yeah.
That's very liberating.
I mean, I'm going to say this again because it was told to me by Jeff McBride, who I met when I was 15 years old on a New York City subway. Well, actually, I think that was a date we had. Whatever, that was long ago, right? So he showed up with a silver glove at 2:00 in the morning, and we rode the subways together. And he was practicing on sleeping workers, and he figured that if they stayed asleep, that he was not doing the magic, and if they kind of woke up and were mesmerized, that he was doing a great job. And that, I have to say, is probably one of the toughest audiences in the world, is New York City subway at 2 a.m. in 1970 something.
Wow.
So, you know, that's dedication.
How old was he at that point? About?
I think I was about 15. He might have been 16 or 17. I'm not really sure.
That's great.
And yeah, it's also a transformation. It is that you're acting as a magician.
Right.
You are an avatar. You're transforming yourself into something that you want to become. Like, I wanted to become a mermaid, so I had to swim all year. Otherwise, how could I call myself a mermaid, right? If I didn't go to the ocean and hang out on the rocks by the seaweed.
Yeah. Yeah, that famous, is it Robert Houdin who said a magician is an actor playing the part
of a
magician, right? Yeah.
So when you talk about these little girls who are shy, I think that they're still shy, but they can inhabit the role of let's just say, Sarah the Greatest. So, you know, if you have permission to be, you know, Sarah the Greatest, then you can inhabit that. And if it is a bigger persona than your daily chores and everything else. You literally put on a hat and you're somebody else. You're a magician, or you have a taller stance, or you stand straighter, or you realize you have to project your voice, something like that.
Yeah, I'm really naturally born a shy person, you know, and performing and teaching has helped me, to use kind of Jungian terms, to develop that inferior, undeveloped part of myself, you know, the extroverted performer part of myself, you know. Without magic and teaching, I'd be like still in the monastery where I lived for 7 years. You know?
I'm going to say one more thing. I did notice from a very young age that most magicians were boys and that they wanted the girls to be their assistant. And I actually remember David Copperfield at Kutcher's asking me for my towel so that he could cut me in half or do some kind of trick. And I'm like, no, you're not getting my towel because I'm wearing that much underneath. And I went over to Al Goshman instead, who was very, very respectful. And I really loved his pepper shaker routine. But I was going to say, gosh, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I think this film, sparks up so many subjects, and I want to try and wrap this up with after seeing the film, right, and through their perspective, and with yourselves perspective, how would you define what is magic? Like, I know it's a tough question, but how would you try and define what's magic, Elise?
Suspension of disbelief. I think that magic is where you believe anything can happen. And I've seen literally in the audience in Abano Terme in the Italian Magic Convention, in an audience full of magicians and skeptics, watch another magician literally disappear from the stage, just like in the movie. And there was an audible gasp because they literally thought that they could never be fooled. They're magicians, and they had no idea how this man literally disappeared from the stage.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to know. And I think that's the other thing. They didn't want to know because it would ruin the magic.
I've been reading, and I would highly recommend this book. I mean, this man is
fun.
He is
the master.
He is he is the master. He and Robert Neal are the two masters of the magic, the philosophy of magic in the world today. And I read 30 pages of this morning, and it's the chapter called "What is Magic?" Just the question you just answered. And he answers the question from a very magical place, like he just gets into a place of dream and desire and fantasy and myth and symbol. And then he starts talking about what is magic, which is really amazing. And then he says, all that you read was Magritte and Breton's manifesto in response to what is surrealism. And it was like a trick. It was amazing. And yet it was perfect. It's one of the, I'm only on page, I don't know what page I'm on now. I'm on page like 60, but I still have another 600 pages to go. And I'm afraid that I'm going to come to the end of it. It's so delicious. It's the best thing I've ever read on magic. And so anyhow, I can't answer your question, but if you want to know the answer, the magic rainbow has
Go read
some
one.
really good things pointing toward it.
I mean, I think magic is
Um,
also the most unlikely things actually happening to you, which in my life they actually have. For example, I once was walking on the beach in winter, came upon a chapter of an encyclopedia that was the letter M, and I said, "Okay, what's the message here?" A chapter of an encyclopedia. I opened the book, and it opened to magic. The history of magic. It was an encyclopedia. I had no idea why it was there. I've never seen it before or after. And I literally had been asking, what is my mission? And I found this encyclopedia. It was like November. There's no one on the beach in November. There was the letter M book sitting there on the beach with nobody around. Literally, this happened to me. So, and the strange part is stuff like this. I have had an amazingly surrealistic life. It happens all the time. So
yeah,
if you believe in the magic, you see it everywhere.
that's exactly right. The belief, the openness to the possibility makes the impossible possible, like finding the letter M on the beach and opening up to magic. That kind of synchronicity, that kind of magic happens.
I mean, if you wrote it into a plot for
They
Dream,
laugh at
you
you.
would say that would.
Your editor would say
What are you
no.
kidding
Your
me?
editor would.
No, I think it's a great plot. It reminds me of that quote from Roald Dahl, that says, "And above all, watch with glittering eyes the whole world around you, because the greatest secrets are always hidden in the most unlikely places.
Yeah.
Those who don't believe in magic will never find it."
And in Gerard Vivante, the first thing he says after he has Gerard introduce himself, he says, "I have always found the most exciting trick is about finding magic in the least likely places." And there's so much truth in that, like to be able to see magic where it's least likely to be. It's wonderful.
The places where we teach, I think that's so true.
Oh my God, you're absolutely right.
When we say that we're teaching the places that we do, people are like, "There's nothing good there. Why would you go there? Like, there's nothing positive about those places. What do you mean that they're magicians?" And when they see them perform, like their perception of reality changes. Like, wow, I can't even imagine that, somebody from that place that it's all bad, right, can do something so cool or so beautiful or so mesmerizing. And I think that's also a meaning that I choose to have for magic, right?
It was so important during all those shows this winter that we did for Google, and I don't know how many, 20 shows, 25 shows for Google or whatever, that you would lead the people to Tamara and Diego by way of showing them where these two kids lived, and that such beauty and magic and wonder and delight came out of that really painful place. Violent and angry and terrible. There they were. It was.
I agree. So, to wrap this up, Elise, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you think that Elise is a different person because of the work that you do with magic? And if so, in what way?
Well, I didn't choose this. It chose me.
Yeah.
I chose a different life, and I was pulled into magic because of my family history and my father, who really lived his life in the service of magic and magicians and beginner magicians specifically. So I believe in magic. I believe there's magic everywhere. I see it everywhere. I actually was a surrealist painter to begin with, because my dad would open the door and he'd be wearing some mask, or he'd try something out on me, and I just thought that's how the world was. I'm very lucky.
That's great.
Awesome, Elise. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for your time, for connecting, for being, there for us, for Magicians Without Borders, for all these years, for your relationship with Tom that continues today. And thank you, Tom, for being here, and for everybody that's listening, either right now live or later on the podcast. So thank you, everybody, and have a great week.
And try to find To Gerard. You'll love it.
Oh, yes, please.
And send us your thoughts and comments, and we'll talk about them. Okay. Good night. Thank you. Thank you, Elise.
And you can do magic with anything.
Anything. All right. Okay. Good night.
Good night.